channel.
Hi, this is John Darst with Darst Light Show, and I wanted to give you a little behind the scenes tour today of our lights. So today is Christmas Day. I am actually enjoying a new toy that my wife got for me, a little new camera system, so I'm going to give this a shot and we'll see how it goes. So let's see, where do we start? We are at about 20,000 lights here at Darst Light Show. All pixels now. I mean, outside of some floodlights and a few landscape lighting elements. Yeah, so we've got 20,000 lights, all do different things. Mostly trees and snowflakes and a few kind of matrix elements. And then a few unique props that we'll talk about. So let me turn this around. And all right, so this is one of our two what we call Tune To displays, and this is the EFL stereo or EFL boombox from EFL Designs, and it's been customized a little bit. So the Coro is as is, and it's stuffed with Evo pixels, and we did a little bit of a paint job on it to kind of give it that classic boombox look. Basically just used spray paint and masked it off, and that's what we ended up with. So you can see this is done with Evo pixels, and so they're flat on the front. So you can see they're on the front, and I like this for the Tune To sign because it really gives just a little bit softer display, and once cars get kind of past it, it's not as distracting for them because the lights don't shine to the side. So on the back, we have a custom bracketry made. Now you can see it's a little bit dirty now at the end of season, but these are 3D printed brackets that I designed, and they are available on Maker World. Basically, there's two rods in the ground, one on each end, and it just the EMT there on the sides just slides over those rods, and it sits right at ground level. The brackets also allow it to sit even, so everything is designed just to sit flush at ground level. Now you could obviously use a similar design to elevate it or do something like that, but this is our EFL Tune To display. So on the back of my EFL stereo, follow that back, and I have a highly underutilized controller here. I've got some things I want to do with this in the future, but the only thing going on in here that, let's see, so I also have a network switch to be able to plug other devices into. I think I'm going to end up putting like a wireless access point out here to give me some more coverage in the yard, not just for light show, but just life in general. I've got a CMB 24D for some landscape lighting, and I've got the Alpha Pix 16 for pixel control. And then right over here, if I can keep the door open, that some people might recognize, that is a wireless DMX controller for the light up bracelets or light up Santa hats or light up sticks or whatever other devices you might come up with. We started using that this year. Been pretty neat, you know, as you walk around and talk to people, they can see your hat kind of flash with the show if you have the Santa hats or your bracelets or whatever you happen to be wearing. Let's see, and then this also has an HP 460 watt power supply, so not huge, but for what I'm using, definitely gets the job done. Okay, now I really liked the EFL boombox setup, so I decided to take what I currently had, which was this P10 display panel in the middle, and I basically built a framework and added a couple of spinners also from EFL with those Evo pixels, and replicated the design to an extent, and ended up with what you see here. So this is a larger version that's on the far side of the yard, so you can see this at any time. This is where I'll also show the song titles, and I'll have the display change for Tune To, or if I'm sending messages out during the show. All of that can be shown here. Now I do have some ideas to change it even more next year, but we'll have to see how those shake out. Now at the very top, you see where it says Darst Light Show. That was actually a custom prop that Boscoyo was offering for a while. And we really liked it, but the problem was I had to change my radio station this year. And as we walk around the back of this, we will see, let's see, it actually has an 89.7 built into the Coro. Well, I couldn't use it as it was because I had to change radio stations due to some frequency overlap this year. So basically I kind of modified it, attached it to this, and it worked for this year. We'll see if I keep it next year or do something a little bit different. Otherwise, this frame is all made out of 2x4s and EMT, and then I also custom made some 3D printed adapters for the spinners, and then used EMT just like I do with all of my other brackets, and that is what turned into our larger stereo. All of this is controlled by an AlphaPix 4 controller right there. So I actually only have one Ethernet cable coming into it, and then I used a miniature 2-port switch so that I could connect both the P10 panel and the AlphaPix to that one output. So we can take a glance inside here. You see how that is set up. Let's see, my camera down. So you can see here I got the one power supply, Meanwell power supply, and I've got the AlphaPix 4. Currently only using 3 of those outputs, and then I've got the little 2-port Ethernet splitter I was talking about, run off a 5-volt buck converter. So all that's self-contained here, and that way I only have to have power and Ethernet running all the way over here across the yard. Alright, so that is our Tune To display on the far side of the yard. Oh, and that P10 panel, so I actually bought it used several years ago. It was originally designed by Wired Watts and is in this nice extruded aluminum frame. It's held up pretty well, but I will probably be upgrading it from P10s to P5s before long, because I do have some red pixels that have gone out on the P10 display that you can't see here, but they are there, and they do kind of bug me, even though nobody else probably notices them. So that's all there is to the Tune To display. Alright, this is new for 2024. This is Hank Chilliams the Snowman. And you can kind of see here in the daylight, he's shining through a little bit. I have him set up dim for my static show. But this is about a 6.5, 7 foot tall snowman. And as you can tell, you can see some light shining through, but you don't actually see any of the pixels, which is a little bit different than most props. This is actually a custom design made out of Coro with 10mm flutes, which is pretty standard for the kind of the heavy duty Coro that we use in light shows. I've got 2 sections, so you can see the bottom ball of the snowman is one section. You can kind of see where we've got a slit there, and then the top piece is a second piece of Coro. That's the head all the way and the middle body. What I did is I took seed pixels with a 1-inch spacing, and they are threaded through the Coro. So if you look here, you'll see at every other channel I go in and out, and with a 1-inch spacing horizontally, and then every other flute vertically gives me almost a square matrix. So I'm basically at 20mm vertically and 25mm horizontally. Spacing works out pretty good to give a good clean matrix look. As you can see kind of behind it, I basically took just like a hog panel or a cattle panel, whatever you want to call this, and I've got a few zip ties where I connect to that hog panel, and that holds my structure. I've had 0 problems with this. We've had quite a few windstorms. Basically what I did was I took these fence adapters, I drove those into the ground, and then I used EMT, again one of my favorite tools, to give some vertical structure to the hog panel. So that goes all the way to the top. Just zip tied it together, and that put together Hank Chilliams. Alright, so that's the front side. On the back side, nothing really spectacular is happening. This is where I have the controller mounted. Alright, So you see the hog panel that everything is attached to. And I'm using, I think, 5 outputs. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 6 outputs for these. And I probably should have used more and kind of distributed the pixels, because I'm not doing any power injection. I'm not doing any power balancing. And I'm running up to about 650 pixels on a single output, seed pixels, which is probably a little too many. And I get a little bit of fading towards the end. But only critical people like me and the other light show people watching this video would even notice it. So kind of up to you how you might want to implement or manage that. But again, purely custom, so you can kind of do with it what you want. Okay, on the controller here, I used a Falcon because that's what I had available. I could have used an 8-port controller, or maybe even a 4-port controller with some power balancing. But I didn't really want to. So, because I wanted to also run some other things off of this controller that I'll talk about in just a minute. So really it's pretty simple and straightforward, and kind of the sky is your limit with what you could imagine doing with seed pixels. I really like this diffused look. It's kind of gives a really nice soft glow that you don't typically see. And I do need to give a shout out to Holiday Technologies, because I was at the Florida Mega Mini show in 2024, and they were selling, I think it was about 2-foot square panels that was this same concept, and I saw it, and I had actually been wanting to do something with a diffused look. And as soon as I saw the seed pixel threaded through the Coro, the idea to do a mega tall snowman in that fashion was born right away. I called my wife and I told her what my change in design, and kind of the rest is history. So I've been working the rest of the year on putting this all together. Had the Coro custom cut and turned into Mr. Hank Chilliams. So say goodbye, Hank. All right, flanking each side of Hank Chilliams here, you see 4 arches. But these aren't just your typical arches. So these came from Charlee's props. And I've been trying to gravitate towards the number of different types of elements that I use in the show. So I don't, or I've already been using trees and snowflakes. So I'm trying to kind of stick with that, as opposed to throwing a different type of element in there for the most part. So I continued, I found these snowflake arches from Charlee's props, thought they looked great, kind of continue with the snowflake theme. And then once I went with the snowman concept, adding the snowflakes just kind of made sense. So each of these arches, you have one arch line over the top, and then you have 5 snowflakes, a lot of submodels with this. So kind of, again, the sky is the limit on what you want to do with it. So you can do leaping arches, you can do leaping snowflakes, you can do patterns within the snowflakes, you can do spinners in the snowflakes, all different kinds of things you can do. And I really still have barely scratched the surface of what I'm doing, but I really love these props. So one of the challenges though was figuring out how to make them structurally sound. So they come with some Coro brackets or some Coro plates because it's split in 2 pieces for shipping. So basically what I did was I took the design of the Coro plates for the backers and I made 3D printed versions of those, and thus the structure was born. So you can see here at the top I have a bracket, in the middle I have a 3D printed bracket, and then I have one at each end. One in the middle where everything comes together, and then another at the end over here. All right, so with those brackets, that provides me a good amount of structure. And these brackets I've also made available on my Maker World account. So you can go to Maker World and find either just the centerpiece or the entire set, and that's all for free. So you can download your own, use your own kind of combination. These will probably work for a lot of other arch designs as well. Kind of the 2 specific would probably be the curve of the one at the top, and obviously this shape of the one in the middle are probably specific to this design. but the bottom pieces are all generic enough they could be used for a lot of different things. Okay, so again, these are from Charlie's props. I'm using traditional pixels. I think these came from Wally's Lights. So these all connect into that same Falcon controller for the Snowman. So again, I used more than 8 ports, so I have a 16 port controller there. Gives me some flexibility for the future to connect all of these 5 props in together on the same controller. All right, the next prop I'm going to talk about is actually a set of props. So you see all of these mini trees in the front yard. So these are Boscoyo mini Coro trees. And I've taken the design and kind of done something a little bit different with it. So I like the idea of peace stakes that we've all heard of, but I wanted to get a little more creative with it. So basically I took the peace stake concept, and I guess these are peace trees or stake trees or peace stars or whatever you want to call them. But I have 32 trees here, and between each tree and star there's 50 pixels in each one. Okay. And to save a little bit of money, sorry Boscoyo, I actually ordered 360 degree trees, but I cut them in half and I'm using 180 degrees out of each one. Now, by the original design, and I'll get closer to one of these so you can see, it actually uses more pixels. So you see I've actually left the bottom row unpopulated, and that gave me the perfect number to have 50 pixels per tree, including the star. Okay. Now you can see there's some little plastic bolt looking things there at the front, and I'll talk more about those. Okay, so 50 pixels per tree, and you see these are traditional bullet pixels. These came from Your Pixel Store, and mine or with Your Pixel Store worked with me, and we actually created custom cables. So I wasn't sure what my spacing was going to be, and I wanted some flexibility for the future. You can actually see here there's no extension here. Basically what I have, let me come around the back, is between each tree I have built in an extension cable. So you see here we're connecting straight to a pixel. Goes through a 6-foot cord that connects in to the end of the string. Let's get this out of here, off of the previous tree. Let's see, so I come off of the tree and connect directly to the next string. So I built in a 6-foot lead between, I think it was 6 foot, between each tree, so I don't have to go also by extension cables and have another failure point. Okay, so while we're looking at the back of the tree, you can see there's this bright neon green bracket. That's just because that's the cheap PETG material I could find to 3D print with. So that is a custom design. It took several drafts to come up with it, but basically it kind of by design kicks the tree back at an angle, has room for 2 stakes to drive through into the ground, and has this also 3D printed bolt that I coined the name Pixabolt, that threads through the 12mm pixel hole directly into the bracket. So it's all there in one assembly that holds the shape of the tree and gives a method of mounting it down into the ground. Okay, so those are my custom brackets to make a 180 degree pixel piece, stake, tree, whatever you want to call it. And like I said, so I have 32 of these. These were new last year, and last year I did like a staggered layout. This year I did direct rows and columns. Kind of have some flexibility, and allows you to do some different things. I think I like the columns like this, just straight, because then when you're at an angle, you get kind of different looks and different effects. These all run on a 4-port AlphaPix controller. So on each of these, let me see, so what I've got 50 lights, 8 trees, so what's that, 400 lights per row, 4 outputs, and so there I've got 1600 pixels in this group of props, all run off of a AlphaPix 4. So here is my AlphaPix. This enclosure I like for like just laying on the ground. Works really well. Came from Amazon. and didn't need to drill any holes, do any customization. It's got weatherproof seals that work great for this application, and I've got it in there with an HP server power supply. Let's see. Alright, so there's my design. So I did some little 3D printed brackets, hold it all together. Plenty of extra space in there. So like I said, I've got the Alpha Pix 4. It's a 460 watt HP server supply, and runs like a charm. No problems. Okay. So that's everything for the pixel trees. All right, next prop is our singing cactus. So this is from Gilbert Engineering. No, this is not a custom prop. They sell this on their shop. So the story behind this is I went to Texas Tech, and basically several years ago there was kind of some drama between a TCU reporter and Texas Tech, where basically they disparaged Lubbock as being out in the middle of nowhere, which it is. But so anyway, that turned into thinking of Lubbock as the desert, and the cactus became kind of a symbol to poke fun back at the TCU reporter and kind of embrace what we've got going on out in Lubbock. So of course I had to find a cactus, get him in the show. So this is kind of just provides a little tie-in there with Texas Tech. All right, and I'll talk more about this controller in a little bit. All right, next prop is our mega, not so mega tree. So this is about a, about 9 foot tall, maybe 10 with a star tree. This used to be mounted to a fence rail post, and I've recently, this year, I changed it to be mounted to our actual tree. So I got some help designing a bracket that everything mounts to up there at the top. I didn't quite mount it straight, but it's functional, and again, most people don't notice this level of detail. So anyway, so I've got the star at the top, got the trees. These are, 50 pixel strands each direction. So basically I wire them in strings of 4. So I go up, down for each output, and then I've got a 4-port Genius long-range receiver that's connected to a Genius 16-port controller on the other side of the tree. So the tree is all self-contained on that one controller, except for the star, which actually connects to the other Genius controller on the other side of the tree. So it's pretty straightforward. This is 2-inch spacing, yeah, so not much to really talk about with this. I might be replacing this next year with kind of a more neon style tree, so I've got some testing to do there, see if I can make it work. But this is pretty straightforward. So no power injection, no power balancing. Again, just 200 pixels per output. Runs pretty clean. My next prop you might not even notice here, but it's actually these landscape lights down here at the bottom. Yes, these are tied into my light show. Okay, now these are from Amazon. I think the brand was XM Cozy or XC Mosey or something along those lines. They're nice design. So they actually normally come with a wireless controller that you can connect directly from your phone. But I actually am not using that controller. So I had these on a wireless E131 controller, but the range of that was not that great. It would keep up with everything fine, but just connectivity was an issue. So this year, I did some rebuild of my controllers, and I call each of these basically hubs. So these connect into a Light-O-Rama CMB24D. A CMB24D is a DC control board with 24 outputs or 8 sets of RGB outputs. So I'm using 2 different sets of RGB outputs for these lights. So I can kind of do a few different patterns with it. And that leads me to talk about this controller. Now this is your Pixel Store box. The only thing I've done to modify the box was I 3D printed a little magnetic shroud cover here, which obviously my glue is not that great because they're coming off already. But anyway, just to help prevent a little bit of splashing on that side, because that side came uncovered, where this side, let's see, came with a cover built in. Otherwise, this is directly from your Pixel Store as shown. Oh, of course, I have my little anti-theft branding here. So that was a little 3D printed tag that I made. Okay, so let's look inside here. Actually, I'll start at the bottom. So looking underneath, look at all those connections. You can pack this guy tight. So what is all that? So what I have is, as you can see, so this is a Genius 16 right here on the front. So that gives me 16 pixel outputs. It also gives me 2 long-range receiver outputs and 2 DMX outputs, okay? So these yellows are my long range, these black are my DMX. So one of those goes up here to my CMB24D board. So this is the DC controller, okay? Let's see, underneath the Genius controller, I've got a 600 watt Meanwell power supply. And that's got a power distribution board, I think from Wired Watts on it, if I recall correctly. And then I've got some more power distribution. Now this, I use a few things internally. So one is I go to a 5-volt converter, and that 5-volt converter actually drives a network switch back here at the back. So I'll talk more about that in a second. I have another 12-volt output, which goes to the exhaust fan up here on the top of the enclosure that I just stuck my finger into. And then these other 12 volts are just accessory outputs. So I wanted to be able to, like, one of the things I run is I've got some security cameras out here. So I run those security cameras off of these same DC outputs versus having a whole bunch of plug-in power supplies for different things. This guy I'm going to keep running 24/7 year-round. So I wanted to be able to keep those security cameras online, and then any other, like maybe 12-volt accessory lighting or anything like that that I want to connect out here. Maybe like some PoE adapters for network equipment in the future, that kind of thing. So these all use X-Connect 12-volt outputs from Blinky Pixels. So 2-conductor X-Connect style outputs from Blinky Pixels. I will say, while I'm talking about 2-conductor outputs, the connectors from different vendors don't all match the same. So I would suggest picking one vendor, sticking with them so that your polarity doesn't change and that the connector style doesn't change. So even though they're called 2-conductor X-Connect style, they're not all created the same. All right, so on this CMB24D, you see I've got cables coming into it. Sadly, really the only place you can get these now is Holiday Coro for these 4-conductor dumb RGB X-Connect style that they call Easy Plug 4 cables. And I don't think they're making them anymore. So they could become in short supply, which is kind of sad because I like being able to tie in kind of dumb DC props. So we'll kind of see where that goes in the future with Pixels really taking everything over. All right. So then at the very back, I briefly mentioned there's a network switch. So this is an 8-port network switch, which is probably overkill for this application. I'm only using a few ports off of it right now, but it gives me flexibility for the future as this is kind of a centrally located enclosure here at the front yard. So I can basically run everything off of this guy. So I've got down here at the bottom, so all these cables, I've got 8 DC RGB outputs, I've got 16 pixel outputs, I've got 2 long-range receiver outputs, I have, I think, 1 network in along with, 6 extra network outputs, all here externally mounted and externally available due to the massive size of this box, along with 5-volt DC and 12-volt DC, all here sourced internally. All right. So that is my central hub, and I've got a few other hubs that I'll talk about as well. They're similar, except most of those use AlphaPix 16 controllers because that's what I have on hand. Didn't really see the need to go buy a whole bunch of new controllers when I have things that work perfectly well. All right. All right, for this one, I'm actually going to start at the controller instead of starting at the prop. So this is what I call my South Show hub controller because it's on the south side of my yard. So on this one, I also have a network switch. So this is a 5-port network switch. I've got an HP server power supply back there underneath it. And then down at the bottom, I've got an AlphaPix 16. And behind that is an 8-port CMB 24D dumb DC controller. So I've got 2-port outputs and RGB outputs, again, for landscape lighting. So I've got landscape lighting up here at the house as well, so all that runs year round. I've got power distribution off of the HP power supply. And then this box came from Amazon. The box is really nice. I was able to get it on one of their kind of lightning deal promotions. I think it was about $20, and it comes with a backer plate. And then I use custom 3D brackets to mount everything to that. I can get my spacing just right. The 3D printed brackets are great because you can design your spacing for whatever board you have and get everything very precise. These standoffs, as you can kind of see in there, allow me to put one board on top of another really easy. And those are quick, 15-minute designs in Tinkercad. One prototype, make some adjustments, and then we're good to go. And then I've got the weatherproof Ethernet connections out here as well. So this actually connects directly to my control or my main switch in the garage. Let's see, so I've got some adjustments to do with this power plug here, sorry. So this controller Ethernet connects directly to the switch in the garage. And then from there, I come out to here, and then from here, I go to different controllers around the yard, and have a couple of extras that I can use for things that I only put out during the show season, such as, let's see, so my pixel outputs, I've got that 16-port pixel controller. You can see a lot of cables here going up to the roof. And then some kind of stringing along. So I have a few things running off of this. So first, I've got in the field of view here Snowflakes. So I've got 4 Snowflakes here on the front of the garage. And I have 30-watt RGB UV floodlights from your Pixel store. So you can do a lot with those. So you see one of those right there. So I've got 4 of those here on this side of the house, 2 on the other. Then I'm going to back up a little bit and see, sorry, I'm showing you the sky. There on the roof you can see I have, let's see, 6 snowflakes. So these are 100 count snowflakes from Holiday Coro. They're one of the first kind of pixel props that I got several years ago. And then you can also see the C9 style or the brilliant bulb style lights up on the roof. So everything that you see here, including the floodlights, is all run off of that AlphaPix 16 controller. Don't look at the garage window yet. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's a different controller. Okay, so I'm running, up to 20-foot extensions because I've got to go up to the roof and then across the roof and all that to connect all these together. Up to 300 pixels on an extension with no power balancing, no power injection. Just use a few null pixels or buffers or whatever you want to call those to boost the voltage a little bit. One of the things I like to do is try to make things easier to put up and take down. So all those brilliant bulbs you see are currently zip tied to EMT. So basically each stick of EMT I can just throw up there on the roof and my spacing is maintained. I don't have to make any adjustments. At the very top in the middle, which let me see if I can zoom in. Well, I can't zoom in that far, but right at the peak there is a bracket that I have screwed into the roof and weather sealed, and it stays there year round, so I don't take it in and out. And that's where the EMT sticks connect to the top, and then they just rest on the gutter at the bottom. I zip tie them at the bottom so they don't move around, and these guys are solid. They don't budge. So much so that the snowflakes actually just lay on the roof, and I've got a small rope that goes from the Snowflake up to the EMT. And again, they don't budge. So even with wind and storms and rains, which we get a good amount of here in North Texas all through the show season, these snowflakes just lay on the roof. Now they're not good sails, so they've got a lot of air space in them, so that's probably one of the reasons why they don't really catch wind bad or anything like that. So I'm not suggesting that for every kind of prop, but sometimes simple is better than complex. The last prop on my South Show controller is Addy's Cross. So if you've been around the lighting community the last few years, you've probably run into Charlee Cohn. Charlee is a local lighting enthusiast who ran her own show for several years until she suffered an injury during her show design by falling off the roof. Hit her up, she'll tell you all about the story. But this cross came along before that. So due to a significant loss in Charlee's family, she was several years ago, once she got into lighting, she was motivated to work with Boscoyo to design this cross, and it immediately was adopted by all of the local light shows. You'll find this in all of our displays, and it really is a beautiful cross, and there's a significant story behind it. I'm not going to tell that story in this video, but go to the Darst Light Show Facebook page and search for Addy's Cross, and you'll find a nice little story from Charlee there explaining the history and the significance of this cross. All right, next we have my window matrix. All right, so I'm a little bummed because if I had waited a year to do this, it would probably be very different. But I used to have in my windows a 2-inch spaced matrix that was a solid sheet of HDPE or plastic that basically blocked the entire window. Well, the wife acceptance factor of that was not great. So I went through a redesign, 2 years ago, and came up with what you see here. So I really like that I could custom shape it, and I used some PVC to bend and shape to the window with these nice arched windows. So it gives it a really unique look and effect. And I went with 1.5-inch spacing pixels, and this allowed me to get HDPE mesh instead, and be able to see through the windows. So the wife acceptance factor is much higher because we can get light in the house, especially in the dining room window, which I'll show you next. Basically it sits on the window ledge, and that's where most of the load bearing is. But then I also have this suction cup from Matos that suction cups up to the window and just kind of holds it steady against the window. Then for backup, up at the very top, I have a rope up at the top, just in case the suction cup doesn't hold, that it won't fall and tear everything up, because I have had that happen. Now I will give you a little pro tip on the suction cup. Clean it really good, clean the window really good, and then apply a liberal amount of Vaseline, and that makes application, the staying power, and removal all much, much easier. Now, it's kind of messy to clean up at the end of season, but that Vaseline is a really, really good trick, and they'll stay stuck to the window all season long and be easy to remove when you're done. So Vaseline does a trick. Okay. This is pretty straightforward. So I've got 4 outputs for this one. I think up to about 250, 300 pixels on a given output, and that goes to an AlphaPix 4 controller. Pretty straightforward build there. I do have to give a shout out. So let's see. So this guy was sitting at ground level up until about a week and a half ago, and we had a lot of rain here. So much so that my ground level was saturated and had about 2 inches of standing water. As you would imagine, with this guy sitting in 2 inches of water, it got a little bit waterlogged. The nice thing is it was sitting vertically like this. So when it stood up and that water came in, the first thing it hit was power distribution here at the bottom of the power supply. And once it did that, it tripped my GFCI, which shut everything down. So I found that most of the show wasn't running, so I went and I reset the GFCI. It immediately turned right back off. So I knew I had a problem. That's when I discovered the controller underwater. once I basically, all in about a minute, I came over here, I picked up the controller, dumped all the water out, it came pouring out. I said, whatever, the show must go on, so I didn't even give it a chance to dry. I went and turned the power back on. Everything started up right away. So no problems with the Alpha Picks, no problems with this Meanwell 500 watt power supply. This is the RSP 500. Everything came up beautifully. So big shout out to Meanwell on a very good design. And as a reminder, do not take out your GFCI circuits. Do not bypass them. They are there for a reason. They will protect equipment, but more importantly, they will protect people. So as you can see in this flower bed, this is where I had the standing water at, and it's still pretty saturated, but no more standing water. If I didn't have that GFCI in place, okay, a GFCI is not a circuit breaker, they're very different. If I didn't have that GFCI in place and one of my nieces or nephews came running through here, they very easily could have been electrocuted, okay, because if that GFCI didn't shut everything down, then we could have had serious problems, okay. A circuit breaker would not shut off on that ground fault detection, okay. It would require an overcurrent condition, which could happen with the short, but not necessarily. So the ground fault is different than a circuit breaker, serves a very specific purpose. So this is a good reminder to talk about that, and do not remove your GFCIs. All right. So let's move on to the next problem. All right, next we have our breakfast snook window, or I call it the dining room window. It's not really dining room, but this is the one that really did not pass the Wi-Fi acceptance factor because I had this entire window blocked. So there was no light. You could not see out. As you can kind of see, you can see some lights in the room there. So this looks through into the kitchen all the way into the living room. So it's really good for natural lighting, and really did not like having that lighting blocked for 2.5, 3 months out of the year, which led to using the mesh design. Now, if I were to do this again today, I would use seed pixels, and then you get an even better view. You can barely see that they're there. So eventually I'll run out of other things I want to work on, and I'll replace this matrix with seed pixels, probably in 2 or 3 years, I'm guessing. But I just designed and built it 2 years ago, so I don't really want to replace it yet. I want to get a little bit more use out of it. This is run off of a single Alpha Pix 4. On this guy, I am doing some power balancing, or some people will call it power injection, whatever you call it. Basically what I do is, from the Alpha Pix 4, I use the 4 different outputs, and then at the end of each of those strings, which I have up to 550 or so pixels on a single output, so at the end of that string, I run a cable back to the power supply. So basically I have each string powered from both ends. So I call that power balancing, because I'm balancing the power across the string. Many ways to skin that cat, but it works really well. You don't see any fading or trailing or anything like that at the end of the strings. So pretty good design, I think, and all run off of one controller and one power supply. So I try to keep it simple where I can. I don't do any real power injection in the typical sense, where I never run on a single string. They all run off the same power supply. I never run 2 different power supplies on the same string of pixels. I don't even have 2 different power supplies in a single controller box in any of my show. Again, just because I want to keep it relatively simple. All right. So that's the only thing on that controller. So now we're going to move to my North Show hub controller. So I've talked about hub controllers before, and I've got a few things running on it. So it's just like the South Show hub controller in design, so I'm not going to show you the actual controller, but I've got these landscape lights on this side of the yard. I've got this custom tree that I designed. Now I've had some problems with the pixels on it, so I need to basically restring it. But this is an Eiffel Tower with a cowboy hat on top. So we live in Paris, Texas, and one of the things Paris, Texas is known for is having the tallest Eiffel Tower outside of Paris or Vegas. And it is the taller than Paris, Tennessee's, because of the big red cowboy hat on top. So it's kind of iconic for people in the area. So I custom designed this to give us kind of a unique show element, and I've gotten some really good feedback off of it, people wanting to know where they can buy their own. So it's been pretty cool to have in the show this year. And then also, let's see, up here on the top of the house, just like over the garage, I have the C9 brilliant bulb style around the perimeter, and then a snowflake in the middle. Okay, so all of that runs off of the North Show hub controller. So really not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but the controller runs year round because it runs this landscape lighting. And I run all of these off of different controllers, so I have zero wiring out in the yard. Another thing that's very important for Wi-Fi acceptance factor. So I've added AC outlets in different areas, like you can see one here, and I did those just with direct burial cable. Again, keep things simple. And then also buried some Cat 5. So if you look along my sidewalks, my driveways, let's see, get my camera caught up here, you don't see any cables run across the yard. Everything is neat and tidy and out of the way. Okay, very important again for Wi-Fi acceptance factor. All right, next I'm going to talk about all these kind of together. So I've got 3 different kinds of props over here on the north side of the yard. So let me kind of pan across, and you can see I'll have 4 trees. These trees were, let me see, I think from Boscoyo. So they're the 8-foot tall Coro trees. And then I've got 3 Hattitude Quartets. So the Hattitude Quartets come from Gilbert Engineering. Each of those has, I think, 600 or so sub props or motion effects or whatever you want to call them you can do. A lot of different faces. You can kind of see there's a reindeer there. There's a light bulb lit up right now. I don't know if you can see it well on video, but it's a snow globe. Let me see. That one has a bow in it. The next snow globe has an angel in it. So very, very versatile props. They can be spinners. They can be snowflakes. They can do all kinds of stuff. Almost kind of intimidating the amount of things they can do. And then you can see the miniature snowflakes strung across the top. Those were from Holiday Coro several years ago. And they provide a nice little element to be able to do chases and that kind of thing across the top of my display there. Okay. Now you see right here in the middle, this one's kind of weird. I used to have a tree there, but that tree had to come down this year. So I now have a tree mounted to a fence rail adapter, where the others, I try to use nature as much as possible and blend things in. So I have trees on trees, right? You see the trees are all just used, and the spacing works out pretty good. I got kind of lucky with the spacing of the trees. So I've been able to integrate with my landscape as much as possible, and it just kind of helps give a nice look and keep things neat and tidy. Okay, so all of this runs off of 2 different controllers, just due to the distance between the props, and again, trying not to use power injection. I would rather distribute controllers out to different areas. So we're going to walk around the back side here, and I'll show you what I got going on. All right, so if I start at this tree, whoa, where'd my camera go? As an example, I have 1 connection here for this tree. So this is a 300 pixel tree. So I've got one, I think this is a 25-foot cable running over here. Now you can see it runs along with a rope. So what is going on here? Okay, so what I do is I'm running this rope, temporary, just for the season, from tree to tree. And then I tension it pretty good. It runs through this EMT that basically helps provide some support for my Hattitude Quartet. So these Hattitude Quartets, as you can see, they're big, they're heavy, they got a lot going on. So they like to spin like sails and twist and turn. So this horizontal string just provides some support there. And then you can see there's also a vertical EMT. So vertical EMT goes all the way to the ground. And then I found that still didn't really provide the support I wanted. So I designed this 3D printed kind of tripod adapter that the EMT slides through and then provides me some extra support kind of to keep this from leaning front to back, side to side. Okay. All in all, it works pretty well. And this horizontal string also allows me to run my cords up off of the ground. Okay, so again, I talk about wife acceptance factor, right? Running these strings off of the ground means it's easy to clean up the leaves because I don't have cords running everywhere. Okay, so a nice functional way to manage the cords. It also minimizes the distance between the controller and the props. So here I've got a AlphaPix 16 controller mounted to the back of the tree. Again, using landscape and using nature. I've got these permanent screws, and then I just hang from that. Oh, sorry, you can't see. Let's see. Hang the controller off of those. Got that all caulked and weather sealed. Yeah, so that's a 16-port controller. It's controlling things in both directions. So you can see cords coming and going in every direction, going up, going down, side to side. So let's follow this one up and we'll talk about these snowflakes at the top. So look at what I got here. Let's see. So these, let me go up, not down. Permanently mounted, so I don't take these down. I have tensioned steel cables. So these are stainless steel tensioned cables with little turnbuckles that I use running between the trees. And then I leave those up year round, and then I just zip tie these snowflakes to those cables. And there's no sag, everything holds together really well. Again, gives me a spot to route all the cables, so nothing's hanging down, nothing's drooping. All pretty clean, and I just kind of bounce from snowflake to snowflake. And let's see, on these, it's actually kind of funny. So I've got 30 pixels, let me see, on each snowflake, and then you can see there's pixels between the snowflakes. So I basically just don't map those pixels, so I kind of treat them like null pixels, and that gives me spacing between each one. So these are actually groups of 3 snowflakes. Okay, so then I have little extensions to go to the next one, and then every group of 3, basically I have 30 snowflakes, 5 blanks, 30 pixels, 5 blanks, 30 pixels, 5 blanks, and then 30 more pixels, which conveniently adds up to 100 for a 100 count pixel string. So I perfectly get 3 snowflakes per 100 count string. All right. Nothing fancy going on in the controller. This one doesn't have a switch or anything inside, so it's just an AlphaPix 16 with a 600 watt power supply. Again, I would rather have a single 600 watt supply or a 500 watt supply versus having multiple power supplies for a given controller. It just keeps things simple. All right, so another tensioned rope supporting this Hattitude quartet and giving me a spot to run all of my cables. The only thing I have on the ground is an extension cord because my power adapter is on the ground. Now eventually I might change that. That's just where I put the plug at because it made sense off season for me as well. But otherwise everything is up and elevated. There's no network cables on the ground, no pixel cables on the ground. Everything is elevated. So see here, I got another tree, follow the cables over, and from the snowflakes, and eventually I get over to my next controller. Okay, now this controller looks basically the same, but it's a little bit different. So for my networking, again, to try to minimize lengths of cable runs and a lot of that kind of stuff, I actually have a switch in here. Oh, got a little cobweb too. Look there. All right, so I've got a 600 watt power supply mounted on the door, an AlphaPix 16, and a 5-port switch. So that 5-port switch allows me to run cables from a controller upstream to controllers downstream, and just makes it convenient for running those network cables. So makes it pretty clean overall, and easy to wire and not have to run as many home run network cables. So I actually like this in general better than using long range receivers. Like I'd rather use regular controllers with Ethernet switches, unless I'm working on saving space somewhere or something along those lines. This just provides a lot more flexibility. Might be a little bit more expensive, but it tends to work. So I guess different strokes for different folks, but it might give you some ideas. All right. So I think that is, oh, all but one thing. So I'm gonna, let's see. What in the world? That's not a light show prop, but it is. All right, so this is a normal built-in landscape fixture or lighting fixture that you'll find on front porches. And I found that Athom makes a E1.31 wireless controlled light bulb that runs WLED. So the bulb has WLED firmware baked into it. There's no hacking or anything you have to do. So it's, again, sold by Athom, Athom. I've heard there's some others on Amazon now that you might be able to find. But basically, with WLED built in, I can control this from my lighting control software via wireless, and the bulb will do whatever I tell it to do. Surprisingly, it works extremely well. So when I bought this, my plan was to just be able to tie in automation with my landscape lighting to turn it off whenever I start up the show. Once I got it installed and connected, I found that it keeps up just as well as any of my wired lights. You don't notice any lag or delay. So again, these work really well. I've been running them year round for 2 or 3 years now, with no hiccups, no failures. I do have it limited to, I think, about 70% of max brightness, based on some things I'd read online, but it has been rock solid, and the connectivity of these is great, and the performance has been really good. So a really good option if you have some built-in lighting. Again, these are Athom, Athom bulbs, and I think I've only found them available from their website or from AliExpress. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask in the comments below. You can follow us here on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook. And please like this video. Thank you.